morning, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar this morning. My name is Lori Burrows, and I'm one of the Regional Vice Presidents for Development for the Ohio Foundation of Independent Colleges. We welcome you to our Redefining Diversity Forum webinar today. This is being recorded and all audience members are muted. If you would like to submit a question during the session, please do so via the Q&A section. We also have a chat area if you need to message our administrator during the presentation, and we will bring forward the questions at the end of the hour. We extend our sincerest thanks to our sponsor, WesBanco, and also to our presenters. We also thank the OFIC team today, Sarah Hance and Tara K.R. Davis in particular, for their support of today's event. And at this time, I'd like to invite Ralph Smithers, AVP for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations at Encova Insurance and OFIC Board of Trustees member, to welcome you all and to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning. So Ralph, thank you very much, and I will turn it over to you.
There you go. That helps out a lot when you're not on mute. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this morning. As Lori said, I'm Ralph Smithers Jr., and I'm the AVP of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Community Relations at Encova Insurance. I'm very proud to be an OFIC trustee. OFIC represents 33 independent colleges and universities throughout the state of Ohio, and the foundation strives to facilitate an exceptional appreciation of independent higher education and its impact on the state of Ohio's citizens, economy, and culture. And OFIC connects with partners and corporations and foundations to make this dream possible by helping to keep education affordable through scholarships, internships, and career opportunities. OFIC also brings campuses and corporations together through diversity grants and events just such as today's forum. Making DE&I as part of our DNA will have a significant economic impact for our state and for our respective colleges. And it's imperative that we are responsive to the changing demographics of our society. This will ensure that our campuses are vibrant and create opportunities for everyone, regardless of their backgrounds. So at this point, I'm very honored to introduce Daniel Juday, our presenter for this morning. Daniel works to build bridges of understanding and empathy across challenging divides. He has spent his life working in the people-centric roles that have allowed him to develop thinking around the nature of education, learning, relationship building, and professional growth. And I've had the pleasure of working with Daniel for years on various different projects, and I always get smarter every time I get to hear him speak. So I'm really glad that you have this opportunity as well. So with that, on behalf of OFIC, I'd like to thank Daniel and welcome him for his presentation on redefining diversity. Daniel, the stage is yours.
Oh, Ralph, thank you. Thank you. Well, the feeling is mutual. I love getting to be with you and look forward to being in the same room, hopefully sometime soon with you. And catching up with you. Thanks to Sarah and Lori and Bill and all the OFIC folks who made today's event possible. I really am always feel honored to be invited into spaces like this. I know everyone on this webinar, this call has a busy schedule. You got a lot going on. You've got a lot of moving parts in your lives, personally and professionally. And I know that the line between those two things, the personal and the professional, have gotten really, really blurred in the last couple of years. And so it can feel often overwhelming trying to navigate between those two sort of dueling realities that we're trying to synchronize into one. And so here I come with an hour-long conversation that I want to have with you. And that's an interruption to your agenda and your day and your task list and all the other things. And so I always feel really honored getting to be your interruption, and I'm really honored that you are spending an hour with us. As Lori said, there's going to be time for Q&A at the end. Even if I've got to just stop talking, I tend to get overly excited about some of this stuff, so I'll have to shut myself up. But I will, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So you can see a little toolbar probably at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. That's different than chat. Q&A will go right to our administrator. who will be able to pull up those questions toward the end of our conversation. So anytime I say something that cues something or kind of resonates with you in some kind of way, sparks a new idea or new question, send a Q&A over to our administrator, and she'll help us out at the end. If you don't know who I am, as Ralph said, my name is Daniel Juday. I work in really the professional development space, doing things like this, facilitating conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, about leadership growth and development, and ultimately about organizational culture, right? Wrestling with these big questions like, who are we? Who do we want to become? Why do we do what we do? How do we get stuff done, right? Unfolding those essential questions, those evolving questions that help us get a handle on where we've come from, how that has affected, impacted, and informed where we are now, and where that dictates we're going to be in the future, and how we can redirect the trajectory of our future selves, teams, and organizations. So I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about some of that. The title for today's conversation is Redefining Diversity, and we're going to do a little bit of work around this idea of what do we think we're talking about when we talk about diversity, and what comes up for us. I'll use that phrase maybe quite a bit this morning. What comes up for us, and what I mean is when we hear language, what ideas, what resonance, what connotations rise right to the top of our brains, because that's how we're going to filter what happens next. So we'll get into that in just a second. All right. First, I want to pause this conversation and ask a question, and you don't have to answer it in the chat or anything like that. This is just for you and your brain and heart. Who do you want to be? Right? As we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, culture, all of those things, broadly, we're dumping all of this conversation and these questions into a big bucket called, who do we really want to be? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Why in the world are we carving an hour out of our day for something like this? Why are we going to spend 15 minutes later today reading an article? And why are we spending hours going through this book? And who is it that we're trying to be in the first place? So I want you to take a look at this list of words, all this language on the screen now, okay? This is not an exhaustive list of like value-driven words. Obviously, there's lots more. But as you look at this list, I just want you to take a second and see what words or ideas rise to the surface for you, right? You might look at a list like this, and the word, second column halfway down, imagination. Man, that just pops right out at me. I want to be a person who's imaginative and creative, and that sparks all of the work and the impact that I drive personally and professionally. I just want, when people interact with me, I want the word that comes up for them to be imaginative, imagination, creative, playful, something like that. Or maybe, fourth column halfway down, discipline, right? When people interact with me and my team, I want them to walk away feeling like, wow, that person, that team, they were disciplined. They were on task, on purpose all the time. They were just on top of every single detail. What discipline. So pick two or three, okay? Two or three of the words on the screen, and that could be hard to do, to narrow some of these things down. I'm going to scan through here, and I'll pick a couple too. All right, I've got a couple. I'll share a couple of mine, and then you have yours in your head, okay? One of mine would be imaginative. The word I tend to use is fresh. I really want to be fresh. When people interact with me, to Ralph's point, which I feel really grateful for, he's saying, oh, when I spend time with Daniel, I always feel like I walk away smarter. That's not really the way I think about it. Hopefully that can be happening. But the way I think about it is when people interact with me, I always want them to feel like I'm bringing some new, fresh idea into a conversation. Even if it's a topic we've talked about a lot, I always want them to feel like I've got a fresh take, a fresh idea, a fresh way of thinking about it, a fresh way of maybe hearing a way that they've thought about it and responding to it, something like that. So imaginative, fresh, that's a word that really compels me. I want to be that person. The other word that drew me right away is third column, top word, authenticity. Gosh, I really want to show up and be present. That when people are with me, they know they're with me. They're not getting, 10 o'clock professional me and noon lunch me is a different person. I don't want to manage dueling personalities. All of us code switch to some kind of degree, right? We show up slightly differently given different contexts and groups and all that kind of stuff. Some of us, by virtue of the way our society is set up, have to code switch a lot. To the degree possible in the spaces that I navigate and inhabit, I want to code switch as little as possible. I want to feel like I'm really me in my skin as much as possible. And I know there's a lot of privilege in my ability to do that. And that's maybe a conversation for another day. So imaginative and authentic, right? Those are two words that I want to embody and that I want to come up for people when they spend time with me. So pick your 2 or 3 words. Got them? Figure out what they are. Now I've got a little Post-it. I've always got a stack of Post-it notes on my desk because I've got random ideas. And if you could see the rest of my desk, you would feel awkward and embarrassed for me because of how messy it is. So there's stuff everywhere. I've got to keep these in front of me because I post them all over the place when I get an idea. So I've got this in front of me. Maybe you do too. Maybe you got a scrap piece of paper. Write the words down. 1 word, 2 word, 3 words, whatever the words. This is who I want to be. Whether they were on this list I've given you or not. Write them down on a piece of paper somewhere. Grab a pen, a pencil, a little scrap of paper. It doesn't have to be sticky or anything like that. You're not going to hold it up to your camera. You don't have to say what they are. Okay, this is just for you. Write them down. All right, take your Post-it. All right, got your words written? Take your Post-it. I'm sitting here. My desk goes this way for a little while. I'm going to take my Post-it and stick it all the way on the other side of my desk. Okay, you do the same. Wherever you can reach, stick that Post-it note of who you want to be as far away from you as you can reach. Go ahead and do that now. All right, good. It's really interesting in a webinar format. I have no idea if you're doing this or not. And I bet just by virtue of convenience, a lot of you are not, and that's fine. So pretend you have done this and it will mean essentially the same thing, I think, for you. When we talk about who we want to be, what we're really tapping into, this idea of values, what we're really tapping into is our intent. This is who I want to be. This is what I want to come up for people when they spend time with me. This is sort of how I want to show up in the world. It's inspirational, maybe it's aspirational. It's goals that we have about the values that we exude as we spend time or show up around for and with other people. It's all about intent. This is who I want to be. Right? And when we're having conversations of diversity, inclusion, equity, when we start talking about unconscious bias, when we bring up words like systemic racism, historic inequity, the 1619 Project, I mean, all of this language that gets inserted into the conversation, you know, a lot of us go back to a list like this and access our intent, right? Well, I want to be a good person, so I must be. Right? The words on my little Post-it note are who I am. But it's really important that as we enter learning conversations, particularly around challenging subjects, that we take a second and pause to separate our intent. This is who I really want to be. And we set it over, we park it somewhere else and say, now let's deal with some stuff. Because if who I really want to be is X and Y and Z, and those are, you know, all these words on the list are good. No one's ever picking bad value words for themselves. They're always good, right? If that's really who I want to be, I don't want to waste time defending my intent. So when words like bias and racism and sexism and homophobia and whatever, when all that language starts to come up, it's a waste of my time, if that's really who I want to be, defending my intent, because no one cares about my intent but me. No one knows what the words I wrote down are. No one cares about it. They care about the impact of the decisions I make around that intent. They don't care about what the intent is. I could have all the best intent in the world and you know, traipse through the world hurting people left and right. And we see evidence of this all the time. So we park our intent somewhere else. We keep it safe. That's a part of my goals, my values, my identity, who I want to be, how I want to show up in the world. It's safe. It's not under attack right now. All of us on this call are well-intentioned. We want good things and we want to be good people. Now we come back and center ourselves into a conversation of, so what kind of obstacles, language, ideas, philosophies, perspectives, worldviews, training, education, or lack thereof might be getting in the way of us being who we want to be. So we engage with tough topics, not hearing them as indictments against our identity, but as obstacles toward unleashing the fullest and most satisfying versions of who we really want to be, okay? So our intent is parked. We all want good things. Now let's figure out together what some of those barriers might look like to becoming those people more consistently and sustainably. Diversity. The title of this conversation is Redefining Diversity. And so I want to park at this word for a minute and just pause for a second. Ask yourself the question, when you hear the word diversity, what comes up for you? When you hear the word diversity, what comes up for you? What ideas, sort of what corollary things, what rises to the surface of your brain when I say the word diversity? Now, we can't do a survey live right here, right now, but I've done it before, anonymous surveys, trying to get a sense of what comes up for a wide swath of people. In fact, I did this for a company not too long ago. I think it was about 150 managers, people leaders. And I asked the question, when I say the word diversity, what comes up for you? And if you imagine a spectrum of responses, right? I got a whole range of responses. So we'll put them along a spectrum. And on one end of that spectrum was things like, rainbows and unicorns and magic and yay and inclusion and everybody matters and all of the sort of the warm fuzzies that, you might imagine somebody who's in that state of mind all the time, that the kind of stuff they're going to say, all the warm fuzzy yummies, right? Gummy bears and yay, everybody's so special and all that stuff, right? Toward the middle of this spectrum of responses, you get things that you probably anticipate. Diversity means different, diversity means everybody's unique, everybody's different, something like that, right? And toward the other end of this spectrum of responses, I got things. Now, remember, this is an anonymous survey, to try to figure out what people are really feeling. Toward the other end of this spectrum, I got responses like diversity is just a quota system. Diversity is an agenda. I remember this one because it stuck out to me so much. I think this is verbatim, although this survey was a couple of years ago. Diversity is a person who wants something for nothing and has gotten political about it. Wow. I'll just say it again. Diversity is a person who wants something for nothing and has gotten political about it. That's what comes up for this person when they hear the word diversity. That's what triggers for them. That's what registers. It floats right to the top of their brain. Now imagine in your team or your organization, your company, whatever, you want to have a conversation about diversity and inclusion goals, strategies, initiatives, all the stuff, right, that we talk about when we talk about corporate or organizational D&I work, equity work, all that kind of stuff. You bring 10 people into the room and you're going to have 10 very different versions of what it is we think we're talking about when we talk about diversity. Right? Sort of the root word of this whole DEIB conversation is diversity. And look at the spectrum of responses we get. Everything from its magical rainbow gummy bear unicorns to it's a person who's gotten political because they want something for nothing. Now you put those two people at the same table and say, all right, let's create our diversity recruiting strategy for our, college for next year. What do we think we even mean when we use that language? The DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging conversation has gotten so shifted toward the equity and belonging pieces because they feel really complicated, and they are, and clearly they're very important. We've really shifted a lot of our focus. I think a lot of our focus has too quickly moved away from the word diversity and what we even think it means, or what registers for us when we come up, because it's going to be the foundational way that we make decisions about what we think we're talking about, right? And here's what I mean. When we use the word diverse or diversity, for most of us, the key word, if we had to say what one word comes up, it's different. Right? We've got 88 people on this webinar, something like that. I bet there are at least 80 of us that if we were called to the carpet to say, what one word does diverse or diversity mean? We'd say different. That's what we mean, right? And when we try to plug that word into initiatives and strategies and so forth, what we really mean is we're having a conversation about people. We understand that, right? So when we say, hear, and use the word diverse or diversity, generally, we're using it to say different people, right? People who are different, right? So I hear stuff. I'm sure you hear stuff. You've probably written things like this or consumed things like this. We're looking to hire 10 diverse new office associates this year. Or we hit our goal, we hired 12 diverse recruiters for our college over the last 6 years or something like that. Or, wow, we really need to get some more diverse people in here. This room is looking really white or really male or really whatever the thing is. We really need to get some diverse people in here, right? That's the way that most often the word gets used or understood in the kinds of ways that we have conversation about it. But diversity doesn't mean different, and diverse isn't a stand-in or a replacement for person. People aren't diverse. A person isn't diverse. Diverse, different from what? Different from who? Right? When we use the word diverse to describe a person, what we're really saying is they're different from me, or what I expect of people in this space, right? They're different from the norm, or they're different from normal. Now, most of us don't explicitly say any of that stuff, right? But that's the sub-conversation floating in the back of our brain, and we're going to talk about how important those sub-conversations floating in the backs of our brains are in just a second. That's the sub-conversation. Because language always means something. Our brains are connection. They're connection making machines, right? They always make connections. That's how we remember information, right? We create neural pathways in our brain. We connect information. So we don't use language in isolation. And so when we say the word diverse in some way, shape, or form, we mean a person who's different from me, right? That subtext, that sub narrative in our brain is then going to influence the rest of the ways that we think about, interact with, or build relationship or not with that person. What diversity really means is the presence of difference across a system, right? It doesn't mean a person. There's no such thing as a diverse person. They're just a person, right? But every person has a diverse set of organs, right? This webinar is a diverse set of attendees. I'm sure there are people who identify as men and who identify as women, who are white, who are Black, who are Hispanic or Latinx, who are Asian Pacific, who identify, with a racial or ethnic origin or identity story, people of different class structures and sort of spending ability and all the kind, right? I'm sure there is the presence of difference in this webinar. I'm sure there's the presence of difference in some way, shape, or form on your team, across your organization. That's what diversity means. Right? It means the presence of difference in a system. And although this feels really sort of 101 and fundamentally obvious, it's not the way we generally use the word, at least not in conversation between leaders as we think about the work that we're trying to do. Most often it's used as a stand-in for a person who is different than me in some kind of way. Well, in what kind of way? Well, what we're really tapping into when we talk about the word or use the word diversity in replacement of a person who's different from me, we mean that their identity or some markers of their identity do or don't intersect mine in some kind of way, shape, or form that feels meaningful to me, right? Because if this person is diverse in my head, what I'm saying, the sub-narrative is, they're different from or different to, depending on the grammatical structure that we need there. They're different from me in a way that feels meaningful. Well, how do we understand that? Well, that's different based on time and space and context. But in general, you could use something like this identity wheel. This is not my intellectual property. If you get online and put in like diversity wheel or wheel of identity, there's all kinds of versions of this that come up. But you can see on the screen, there's a bunch of different ways to think about sort of who I am in terms of my identity, or what I call identity markers, right? Things that other people experience me as and things that I experience myself as, right? So let me explain this really quick, and then we're going to do a quick exercise with it, okay? So when we say identity, what we really mean is sort of who we are and how we show up. And at the center of that is our personality, right? And you can see that in the middle of this diagram. There's a big blue circle. It says personality. I don't know how to define personality exactly. I don't know if it's nature or nurture. It's probably both. But in some way, shape, or form, all of us have a personality, right? And it seems to drive a lot of the ways that we want to show up in the world, if we can control the circumstances. I might want to be with people all the time. I might want to be able to take breaks from people in groups. I might want to never really talk to other people very much, but whatever, all those kinds of things. You know what personality is, right? Everybody's got one, and it's unique to them. Probably no one person's personality is an exact replication of another person's personality, right? Next is that green ring, those internal dimensions of identity. These are things that we don't really choose. We don't choose. I don't choose my age, right? I didn't choose my race, my ethnic background. These are things that get assigned to us when we're born in some way, shape, or form. Sort of these things all just feel true to me or are assigned for me, right? I was born on a specific date. And as a human being, I belong to a chronological system that tells me now how old I am. Age, years, months, days, hours, minutes, I could figure out, right? I don't choose my age. Now, I do have some choice in how I express my age, right? I just turned 40 like 2 weeks ago, I guess. So I'm a new grown-up. I always saw 40 as the true adult. So I think I am one now, but I didn't magically get more mature, so that was unfortunate. But I'm a 40-year-old, right? I didn't choose 40. The chronological system chose that for me. My parents, I guess, chose that for me in some kind of way. But I get to choose what 40 looks like. So the clothes I have on were my choice today. This is what 40 looks like to me. The language that I use, that's how I choose 40 to sound, right? The words that I'm saying, this is what 40 sounds like to me, right? The ideas that I wrestle with, all those things. I get to choose kind of how to express it, but I didn't choose it. Same thing with race and ethnicity, right? Race and ethnicity are not exactly skin color, but we talk about it so much as skin color in America. So, I'm white. You can see I'm pretty peachy white. I didn't choose that. That's the way I came out. I'm a European mutt. And so I'm French and Irish and German. And I suppose if I want to do the genealogical research, I could. And that'd be great. It'd be interesting. And it would probably be really revealing and cool, but I didn't choose it. I do get to choose how I express it, right? Let's say I do some research and find out, wow, I'm way more Scottish than I realized or something, right? Well, I could figure out what tartan my family comes from, right? What plaid pattern like goes with me, and I could start wearing that at formal occasions. Next person I know that gets married, I could wear a kilt with that tartan plaid, right? And that would be me expressing my ethnic backgrounds in a way that would feel meaningful to me, right? Or I don't have to do that if I don't want to. I can choose, but I am what I am. I'm whatever European cocktail that I am, basically, right? So those are all of those things are things that get assigned to us, and then we choose how to express. The yellow ring, those external dimensions of identity, are things we do get a lot of autonomy, a lot of choice over, right? I choose my marital status, for instance, right? I chose to ask someone to marry me every day. I think I choose to stay married by making it work, right? That's the way that most of us think about long-term relationships. You could replace that if you don't. If you're not into the institution of marriage, a long-term relationship or partnership, right? I choose my work experience. I've chosen what jobs to say yes to and no to and all that kind of stuff. I choose my personal habits. All of the things in that yellow ring, we have a lot of autonomous choice over, and often we choose something in there over and over and over. Religious practice, for instance. Right? When I was 6, I was just kind of whatever my parents were. And then I was 12 and it started to become real to me. And then it was 16 and it was like, no, I don't care that much anymore. Right. And then I was 20. I was like, yeah, I don't care at all. And then you're 25 and it's like, well, it's kind of a good group of people. Now it's hard to meet people. Then you're 35 with kids and you're like, let me back in. I think there's free childcare, right? I mean, yeah, over and over and over. That's a very shallow example and doesn't reflect my actual experience. But over and over and over, we get to choose our religious experience. You could be X today and Y tomorrow if you want, right? And no one needs to hold you accountable to that except yourself if it's an authentic choice. You get to choose, you get to choose, you get to choose, right? That doesn't mean they're more or less important to you than anything in the green ring, right? It just means we exercise that choice differently. Same with the red ring. The red ring are organizational dimensions of identity. As adults, we spend most of our waking hours at work or doing work or something like that. And so the way that we work, where we work, how we work, what kind of work it is, what company it's for, all of those things tell us something about our value, right? I mean, with work, we literally get assigned a value because we have a salary or something, some kind of monetary, compensation. It tells us something about our sort of theoretical or ideological value to the world based on the industry that we're in, all that kind of stuff. It informs us. It tells us who we are and who other people are. This is obviously incomplete, but this is our identity on a piece of paper. You could say something about yourself in all these categories, and we'd have a pretty good sense of sort of who you are and how you're showing up in the world. And when we say the word diverse to mean a person, right, that person's diverse, what we mean is we've identified something on this chart. I mean, we're not thinking of this chart, but we've identified some identity marker that feels meaningful to us and have decided that that person doesn't intersect it in a way that's meaningful, right? And we usually do this based on, our experiences. So look at this graph, and it takes 30 seconds. I've talked a bunch about it, so you've had time to look at it. Just take 30 seconds and figure out kind of, what are you thinking a lot about these days for yourself? For me, I just turned 40. I'm thinking a lot about age, right? A lot of my sort of mental bandwidth, psychological, emotional energy is spent on thinking about age and getting older and all that kind of stuff. I'm a parent. I've got kids. A lot of my emotional bandwidth, my time, my energy, my money, my passion, it's tied up in parenting, right? I mean, you got good days, got bad days, but on the good days, a lot of my energy is tied up in parenting. And on the bad days, a lot of my energy is tied up in parenting, right? And so it's a big part of who I am. It's hard to separate me from daddy me, right? Because it's such a big part of who I am. So those are a couple things that I'm thinking about. What are you thinking about a lot? So pick one or two things where you're spending a lot of your mental energy. What we tend to do, if we find someone who is spending a lot of their time, energy, money, passion in enough intersecting spaces, we essentially say they're like us. If they're doing it in a way that we understand, right? And because there might be lots of people who are thinking about age, but if they're 80 instead of 40, I won't feel as connected as if they're 40 and I'm 40, right? So they've got to be doing it, practicing it, thinking about it in a way that makes sense to us. But if we have enough intersecting points, we start to think about this person as like us. There's a lot of research that tells us what happens after we've decided that someone is like us, right? There's this huge cache, I call it pre-grace, there's this huge cache of pre-grace we give people to mess up, to make mistakes, to err, to put their foot in their mouth, to be mediocre. There's this huge cache of pre-grace that we insert in because, remember, go back to the Post-it note you wrote. Remember all those good things that you wrote? We assume people like us want to be the same kinds of person that we do. They have good intent. And so we sort of register their good intent and we front load the relationship with all the pre-grace of that shared good intent because they're like us. And so now we have this sort of big buffer of grace and movement that when there's friction, whatever, we can sop up a lot of relational friction because they're like us. It's in-group behavior. And there's a lot of research and a lot of studies that show us kind of what this really looks like. The opposite is true too. When somebody doesn't intersect our identity charts in a way that feels meaningful to us, whether it's because it's not the same thing or they're not doing it in the same kind of way, somewhere inside of us, we say something like, well, they're not really like us. This person's not really like me. And the flip side of that in-group behavior is just as true, kind of out-group behavior and choices, right? When I think someone's not really like me in some kind of way, like their skin's not the same color, they don't belong to the same socioeconomic class, they're not parents and I am, some kind of way, shape, or form that my brain says they're not like you, I start practicing out-group behavior, which means I don't preload the relationship or the interaction or the conversation with all of that grace, that huge buffer for mediocrity and error and failure and mistakes and foot and mouth and all the stuff. I don't do that. Instead, I'm on the sharp lookout for this person to make a mistake because I expect them to say something ignorant because they must not be as smart as me because they're not like me, to do something bad because they don't have good intent. I have good intent and they're not like me. Our brain is constructing this very bifurcated spectrum of behavior. People who are like me are good and I anticipate good from them. People who aren't probably aren't, and I'm on the watch. I'm watching them. I had a conversation with a K-12 educator just yesterday who talked about something that's happening in some of their school buildings where white teachers are following Black students through the hallways, just between classes. They're just following because they expect them to do something wrong. It's a district where there are not very many Black students, right? And these hallway monitors are not following white students around, right? They're targeting students of color because their brain has said, these are not like me. These people are diverse. They're different in some kind of meaningful way. And because of that, my brain is telling me, be on the lookout, be on the watch. And so you can see these three truths, right? If someone intersects us, they're like us. If they don't, they're different, they're diverse. And that word becomes a divisive stand-in, right? That triggers out-group behavior. I'm on the watch for you to do something wrong. I expect you to make a mistake, or I expect you to be bad. And really, we only think about a couple of these things at once because our brains are pretty limited computers. We don't have the bandwidth to run all those identity markers for ourselves with all the same kinds of rigor all the time. I'm generally only thinking about a few things. In large American context, we're thinking about race all the time, right? We were a country founded at the intersection of kind of racial disparities, right? We had native indigenous peoples living here that looked a certain kind of way, and people felt like they belonged to a certain kind of race. We had white Europeans showing up here. We call them white. They wouldn't have called themselves white then exactly, right? And then historically, we have kidnapped and brought millions of Africans from African to American. So you have this intersection, this collision of this racial disparity, and there's this dissonance of sort of who belongs where and why based on essentially skin color. And that hasn't really gone away in America, right? Most of us are kind of obsessed with race, even if we're not consciously thinking about it all the time. It's something the back of our brain is churning because it's the way a lot of our systems are set up, our neighborhoods are set up, right? Who we see where is kind of predictable, right? And so we're governed a lot by these systems. So race is a huge marker we're looking for, skin color. We're looking for that to figure out, is this person like me or not? So much so, if I'm in a room of white people, if I say the word diverse, most people in the room think I'm talking about Black people. And in fact, some people use the word diverse as a polite stand-in for the word Black. Oh, did you meet Roger? Yeah, I met him. Is he the diverse guy, right? Diverse because they feel uncomfortable saying the word Black. And so they use, so much so that diverse has become a stand-in for that, right? And so maybe we're focused on class. Certainly we're focused on race. We're probably focused on sexual orientation and gender expression because that's how we build relationships. That's how we kind of understand people from how close am I allowed to get to this person and what's the relationship? What's the propriety of this relationship look like? That's just a big part of our social structure in America. And so that's a lens that we're thinking about a lot. And so the question becomes, gosh, aren't we doing a lot of damage to ourselves, our growth, our development, our impact, the outcomes that we want to have, the relationships that we want to build, if we bifurcate everybody into two groups called like me and not like me? And why do we do that kind of stuff anyways? The answer is yes, of course, we're doing ourselves tons of damage. And that's one of the things that's really important to remember when we're having a conversation about diversity and inclusion and equity and belonging and all things. We're not talking about altruism. We're not talking about charity. We're not talking about how to be the nice guy. We're talking about the fact that we are robbing ourselves every moment of every day when we tell ourselves that there are people who are like us, and so they have attributes and talents and all the things that we want and that we think are good, and that people who aren't like us probably don't. We rob ourselves of the richness of all of the relationships around us, of all the people around us who bring experience and expertise and talent and ideas and information and innovation. We rob ourselves of learning new cultural ideas, of music, of food. We rob our society at large of all of the change and innovation and development that we could bring to our society at large if we included a larger group of stakeholder voices in big system decision making. We rob ourselves all of the time. But because I'm speaking as a white man now, we think we are normal, that must mean they're not. In group, out group. And so I walk through my life not realizing how profoundly I'm stealing from myself all day, every day. And here's why we're doing that. all of us have to navigate a really complicated world, right? Life is hard. People are complicated. The world is complex. I mean, there's a lot going on, and we have to make sense of it, and we have to do it relatively quickly. I don't get to sit around and mull over every decision that I need to make hours on hours on hours on end, right? I've got to make sense of the world quickly. And so metaphorically, you can think, you see a backpack on the screen. Metaphorically, think about the idea of a backpack, and you carry a backpack full of all of this stuff, all the tools you need to help you navigate this complicated world, right? And I carry one and you carry one. And that backpack comes from our experiences, all these tools, all these strategies that we have for making sense of the world. That comes from all of our experiences, the stuff that we've participated in and done, the things that have been done for us, to us, at us, around us. All of these experiences create emotional or emotive states in our brains. Emotive states in our brains are when our brains release certain cocktails and concoctions of chemicals that give us or create in us different kinds of sensations and connect those memories to other memories, good, bad, ugly, or otherwise, right? Those emotive states, the deeper or bigger the emotive state, the more likely we'll remember that experience. That emotive state then is a predictor. It creates an expectation of future experiences, right? If I have an experience that creates a certain kind of emotive state, my expectation is that a similar experience will create a similar kind of emotive state. So let's say you say, hey, Daniel, I got a new cat. You want to pet my cat? And I say, oh my gosh, what a beautiful cat. And the cat goes chomp and bites my finger, right? I have an experience. The cat bites my finger. My emotive state is I do not enjoy this. Cat bites are gross and dirty and all the things. It's painful. I got to go to the doctor. I got to get a shot. Maybe I get sepsis. It's horrible. I have a terrible experience because the emotive state is all this negative stuff. It's pain. That drives an expectation then of my future interactions with cats, right? Another friend comes up to me tomorrow and says, hey, Daniel, I got a new cat. You want to pet my cat? No, I don't want to pet your cat. Get that cat out of here, right? And so our backpack becomes filled across the expanse of our life through our family experiences and academic experiences and relational experiences and travel experiences and all the things that create all these different emotional states in us that create predictors, expectations of what future experiences with people, situations, and things should look like. And we get ourselves into this kind of really circular rhythm, right? Where we know how to navigate the world. And I can make sense of people, places, and things pretty quickly, which is helpful, right? Because I've had similar experiences, or think that I have at least, and they've created similar kinds of or emotions that I remember that create certain kinds of expectations. And we have a way of coming into new situations, new places, relationships to new people, and having a ton of predictors about what it will be like. One of my friends is a neuroscientist, absolutely brilliant person. Ralph says every time he talks with me, I get smarter. I think he's being kind. Every time I talk with my friend, he legitimately melts my brain because I don't know so much of the stuff that he just knows from his research and studies. He says that the brain is a prediction engine. That's what he calls it, that it doesn't like unknowns or grays. So it's trying to peer around the corner of every new circumstance or situation and predict what will happen based on this circular sort of experience, emotion, expectation pattern. To the point where he says no interaction that we have with any person is ever neutral. There's no such thing. We cannot come into any interaction with a person neutral because our brain already, as soon as they open their mouth, as soon as we see them, as soon as we experience some facet of who they are, our brain has already predicted what the experience will be like. Isn't that crazy? That we can't even have a neutral experience with somebody at the beginning of a conversation or relationship or meeting. Our brain has already peeked back into the past to see what has happened last time or what we have thought has happened, and then peek around the corner of this new conversation or relationship or meeting and predict what it will be like. Our brain is doing the work of relationship building before we've even started to build the relationship. That's crazy. That's crazy. And so what we have to do is target the moment in here where we have power, where we have autonomy, right? Decisions turn expectations into new experiences. I can have an expectation of something and then make a decision that expectation is not going to run this new experience, right? This is the moment. I can't change my past experiences. And I can't really rewire the emotive states they created in me. There is some work around trauma-informed behavioral studies and therapies that can help somewhat rewire what has happened to us emotionally. But overwhelmingly, we can't. And it's really deep work, and most people aren't going to do it. Where we do have power and autonomy is in the decisions that we make that take us from our expectations to new experiences. And this is what I mean. Here's the decision-making system. We're gonna fly through this, right? This is how our backpack works. New person, new experience. We're trying to make a decision. And so we make a decision based on what we think is real, based on what's in our backpack, right? The identity markers, this person is like me or not, whatever. Whatever I take to be real is what I think to be true, right? If I'm going to make a decision, it's got to be based in reality. So how do I know what is real? Well, it's whatever I think is true. Well, fine. It's true that this person is like me or is not like me. It's true that I had this experience in the past or I didn't have this experience in the past, whatever, right? Well, how do I know what's true? Well, what I believe to be true is based on what I perceive, right? I see this person as the same skin color as me. I don't hear an accent. They speak the same way as me. They rode up in the same general kind of car that I have. We must be in the same kind of socioeconomic class. Whatever is driving our expectation of this experience, this person will be like me or not, right, is based on my perceptions of who they are, literally my 5 or 6 senses: sight, smell, touch, taste, well, sound, all that kind of stuff, right? Our perceptions drive our truths, right? We bring in information through our perceptions. That means it's true to us because we just perceived it. If it's true, it must be real. If it's real, I can make a decision about it. And that gets nested in that little backpack, right? Where's our perceptions coming from? Well, you know as well as I do that our senses of perception are based on intake, not output, right? I don't bring something into being by looking at it or touching it. It's already real. That's why I can perceive it. So what I perceive is simply what I already believe is real. You can see the same circular reasoning in terms of how we make decisions about what we think is real in the world, right? What I think is real is whatever's true. Well, how do I know it's true? Well, whatever I perceive. Well, what is it that I perceive? Well, whatever's real. Well, what is real? Truth. What is truth? Perception. And perception is reality, right? You can see, I call this loop the I know what I know, what I know, what I know, what I know, what I know loop. This is unconscious bias. This is that backpack that we carry around to help us navigate the world, the tools that we have to make quick decisions about things, right? The experience, emotion, expectation kind of loop. It's a closed loop. Right? Bias isn't a moral position. It's a decision-making system. It says, I already have all the information I need about this based on identity markers that I've already kind of clocked and put into my backpack and see what shakes out. I already know what I already know, what I already know. And this isn't happening up here in our prefrontal cortex where we have conscious thought and analytical ability. It's happening in the basement of our brain, in our limbic system, the same area where stuff like our heartbeat is happening and decisions that we're not really consciously in control of are happening. That's where this circular reasoning, this biased decision-making is happening. And it's super helpful to us in lots of ways, right? We can make very quick sense of a room and all the things in it because it fits patterns that we're used to. I know that's a poster, not a real picture of not a real person on the wall. It's just a picture of a person on the wall. And I don't have to freak out that they're going to jump out at me. It's a pattern. I recognize it's a poster. I get it. I know what I know, and I can make appropriate decisions about it now. I don't have to be scared of that picture. It's not real. That's super helpful, right? Unconscious bias, this I know what I know system of decision making is super helpful for lots of the ways that we navigate the world, except when it comes to people, because people don't fit these kinds of patterns, because people aren't patterns. And so when we are doing the work of redefining diversity, we're going to stop using diverse explicitly and implicitly in our heads for thinking about people. And we're going to start thinking about identity and identity markers and how we are showing up in the world and where that came from, what's informed our backpacks and why what's in there is in there, and why that makes us think certain people are like us or not. And then we think about how that cues our I know what I know, what I know loops, because we're going to make unconscious and ultimately then conscious decisions about, with, for, and at a person based on what we think we know about them, based on identity markers we think we recognize, based on how that fits into our backpack of tools for navigating the world. This has been a really condensed conversation, and there's lots more to explore here, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I want to go into some Q&A, and I know there's some questions that came in. So Sarah or Laura, I'm going to turn it back over to you, and we can do some questions.
Awesome, Daniel. Thank you so much. Yes, we do have a couple that are coming in. I'll go ahead and start off with the first question that was about the opening exercise, about asking us to define who we want to be, taking that note and sticking it over in a separate area of the room. Explain a little bit, what does that process look like in real time, in the real world, on a day-to-day basis? Because the example was great, but how can we use that in the real world?
That's great. So the easiest example I can think of is the term microaggression. And that's another one of the things that flags all kinds of stuff come up for people. But, for instance, one of the things that I hear a lot about is when we call Black men and women articulate, right? You meet somebody and you say, oh my gosh, you're so articulate, right? That's an aggressive thing to say, a prejudiced thing to say, because it's driven from the assumption that a Black person wouldn't be articulate. And so we express our surprise and congratulate that person for being articulate, right? Let's say I have just met a Black guy and I say that to him. His experience of me is that I have had very low expectations of who he is, that he's probably not educated, he's not articulate, he doesn't have a good idea, whatever the thing is, right? He can tell that I am coming to him from a place of, I don't respect you, right? Versus my experience of that interaction, I think I've just complimented him. I just met Greg, and Greg, you're so smart, you're so articulate, you speak so well. Based on my intent to show up authentically and be present with people, which is good, that's my good intent, I have communicated my intent to somebody in such a way where I'm actually saying the quiet parts out loud, that in the back of my brain, I didn't expect you to be articulate. So me being present with myself right now, I'm suddenly realizing, oh my gosh, you are articulate. And so the same moment in time, gosh, you're so articulate, or wow, whatever the comment was, the person I've said it to has experienced what we generally would term as a microaggression, somebody doing something that just adds to this person's day in so many kinds of ways. But from my perspective, has just reinforced that I'm a good person. I've done what I've wanted to do. It's a positive character quality. I feel like I've just exuded it, and I've given this person a compliment. So we've had two totally and radically different ways, because I'm thinking about my intent and they're experiencing the impact.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've had a couple of comments in the chat too, talking about how that term intent versus impact is such an important kind of distinction. And it's a great point that at times is overlooked. Yeah. Moving to the next question, this person said, I've heard the word intersectionality quite a bit. A couple other folks had questions around that as well. Where does that fit in the identity wheel exactly?
Yeah, so I think the thing about intersectionality, when you look at a graph like that, of course, it's a very oversimplified way of thinking about someone's identity. Intersectionality just comes from the word intersection, right? That you're not any one of those things on that graph in isolation. I'm not just white, I'm not just middle class, and I'm not just living in Columbus, Ohio, right? I'm all those things at once. And in the intersection of those things is where my experience kind of unfolds in the world, because nobody outside of me experiences me as any of those things in isolation, right? They experience the accumulation of those things. The same is true for obviously everybody else. And so generally when we think about intersectionality, we think about what it means for somebody to move through a world or a society that was created with expectations of certain kinds of people inhabiting it, right? That this neighborhood is for these kinds of people, or this work or this industry is, suited for this kind of, historically we can unpack a lot of that. It means that when they exude or exhibit intersections of unexpected identity markers, the inertia that they must break to not only get into, but stay into that kind of space is even more. So for instance, I might not expect a Black person, I'll just keep using black and white because in my industry, that is most often what we're talking about. And obviously the conversation is much bigger than that. In the finance industry, maybe I don't expect a Black person to become one of the financial advisors in my firm. And so this Black man has some inertia to break, to prove to me, not that it should have ever been his job, but to prove to me that he belongs in that space, right? That he's got the chops just like I do and all this stuff. But what I really don't expect is a Black woman, because women aren't necessarily expected historically in the finance industry, and neither are Black people. So intersectionality would say that then a Black woman is going to have a unique experience. It's not just a woman's experience, and it's not just a Black person's experience, it's a Black woman's experience. And there's extra. It just means that the emotional, psychological, and social tax that we put on people to be and stay in certain kinds of spaces in our society increases every time those intersections mean they're even more unexpected in a space like that. And, we could look at 100,000 different examples right now, from the current, Supreme Court justice hearings to 100 other things, to show that when we don't expect someone in a certain kind of space, we create a lot of inertia that they must break to be there.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Thank you for explaining that one. Daniel, we have several other questions. Those who have asked questions with their information, we'll definitely look to kind of follow up via email. I know we want to kind of, be respectful of everyone's time. I know Lori has a couple of things she wanted to kind of just, fill in at the end. So Daniel, thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation, answering the questions. At this point, I'll invite Lori to kind of come back on and give a little bit more information for the session.
Thank you, Sarah. And we thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Special thanks again to Daniel. He has a website, danieljuday.com. And also we want to thank Ralph again for his introduction, and again, West Banco for their sponsorship. OFIC will email a survey after the webinar for your feedback. And the recording of this event will be made available for viewing if you would like to share with your companies, with your campuses. We really encourage you to view it as much as you would like in the future. And also our previous diversity forum that was online in 2020 is available at ofic.org. For our OFIC member colleges and universities, this is a friendly reminder that we are currently accepting RFPs for our diversity grants program through April 15th. If you have any questions, please contact OFIC for further details. And then finally, we just want to thank you all for attending. We will be announcing our future diversity forums in the near future, hopefully in person this fall is what we are aiming for. And there's even discussions about Daniel being re-engaged with our future diversity forums as well to continue conversations. So at this point, we will be concluding the webinar. We hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Again, if you have any questions, please contact us at OFIC, and also check out Daniel's website. And we thank you all for your time today, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you.